I think a lot of us really underestimate what hunger can do to us. Food is a very emotional thing. That's why people are so passionate about agriculture and people are so passionate about gardening. And like, even if you're not, if you're completely removed from the industry, you probably have opinions about farming and industrial agriculture just because you do eat every day.
Welcome back to another episode.
Episode 3.
Episode 3. Yep. So, I think we should just follow up on our conversation from the end of last week. By the way, welcome to the Denton Farms podcast. I think that's what I've titled it. So I've taken the creative liberty to just call it the Denton Farms podcast. I don't think we need to come up with a complicated name. I don't think it's going to do too much to help. So I don't ever find podcasts on Spotify or Apple Music podcasts. I usually just someone tells me about it and I end up listening to it. So
Right, yeah.
I think we'll get by with that. But yeah, last week we were talking about just kind of the industrial farm. We ended last week talking about the industrial farm institution. I don't know, just the way our current state of industrial farming, and people saying we don't want this. We want small farms. We want family farms. We want this. And so we're not gonna push that down because I think we'd all be happy to see more of that. But also to totally dismantle and tear down what the industrial agriculture industry has become would be at a great detriment to millions upon millions of people. So we're gonna talk about that. So yeah. So Neil, what are your thoughts as someone who happens to have an extensive garden, but also happens to farm several thousand acres? Like, what is you've got a very dual view of this all of, hey, you understand people's concerns, but also this is your livelihood.
I do. I love to produce a garden, and it's actually one of my favorite hobbies. Also, I'm a backyard chicken guy. So I love, I love the small time producer. And I think, there's room in the market for, like I hear on podcast and on media, people always ask, well, how do I get involved in farming without copious amounts of capital? And I think, to get into the industrialized portion of farming, it is very capital intensive. But, there is a market for the niche gardener right now. The person that has, the ability to produce a high quality produce. And so how do you get into the industrialized, maybe the corn and beans farm, or even like a large scale produce farmer? It's I'd say without a copious amount of capital, to get on the large scale right out of the gate would be very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But you could start by, if you could acquire a small acreage, maybe even an acre, you could produce a lot of food off an acre. And if you're willing to get out there and do the hard work, you can produce enough food to maybe not make a living off of, but to definitely supplement your income. And then, scale that business. And to me, that's a good way to get involved in agriculture, is start small. And, with hard work and effort, you can scale that business, especially if you're producing a quality product. And, I think there's a balance to, like we were talking about before, there's a balance to what we need to be doing in industrial ag versus what we need to be doing in fresh produce ag.
Mm-hmm.
We need both. The problem with fresh produce ag is it is very labor intensive, and it does, like when you get down to it, it's expensive to produce really high quality produce. And do we want everybody to be able to eat high quality produce? Yes. But just because of the way the world is, not everybody can afford really high quality produce at every point in their life. And at the end of the day, the industrialized food system is set up where you have the ability to feed yourself at a relatively reasonable level. And then as you work hard in your life and you gain more assets and more capital, you can begin to feed your family or yourself more healthy by working hard and and being able to buy those high quality items. But for the person that is still getting started in his life, like is a college student or is a person in a urban environment where they don't have a lot of job opportunities, there's still reasonable costing food where they can um, get by and still survive relatively
Hmm.
healthily. There's
Yeah.
places in Africa where that's still not happening. There's not enough food to go, even though we're producing more than the world needs. It's not being evenly distributed, and um, there's areas of the world that aren't getting fed at all, really.
Hmm.
Um, and so, and that's a job for that's a job for our governments to look at is um, open those markets up so those people have the ability to be able to buy food in that market cheaply. Um, and I know that some of it is like um, like they have no ability to buy because they have no ability to get work, and but that's something that we can't fix in the short term. That has to be fixed with policies over the long term. So, in the short term, what do we need to do? Well, we definitely produce as much food as we can produce, and that way, it does, it does drive the commodity price down, and it allows, a bigger subset of the population to buy,
Hmm.
and I think that's, I I want people to understand that. Us as farmers and ranchers, uh, we want to provide that supply to people, and we want it to be relatively inexpensive or very cost effective with their resources, so they can, you know, feed their family safely and with ample amount too, where they're not having to, um, choose between a meal and a place to live.
Yeah. I think people forget often, especially in the US, like our food system has been what's allowed us as, America to become the world superpower that it is. Like you hear complaints about government subsidies to farmers, and you hear complaints about corn and soy and wheat and just the massive scale of all these grains that we're constantly growing. Like we often forget, hey, like we buy like some of the cheapest food in the entire world. Like, and that's to our benefit. Yeah, like I think you and I can both agree it's probably not like we both like you don't have to ask any grain farmer like, hey, would you say eating only processed grain food is healthy for you? They're gonna say no. Like there's a key component of our diet that does involve fresh fruits and vegetables and things that the less time it spends being transported to and from locations. Like I think we can all say we're big fans of that. I am a huge fan of farmers markets. I am a huge fan of people with gardens. Like I want to have a garden if I had time to actually take care of a garden. It's just a huge time intensity thing. But like our industrial food system, not only has it allowed us to grow the U.S.'s economy into something that had never been seen before this, it also does help support a lot of the just poorer focus in the nation. Like I think, I was reading through some comments on a video on Instagram this morning. This one's the oldest farm models don't work for anyone but the largest farms. Americans want smaller producers, locally sourced food, grass-fed beef, quality pork, eggs, and chicken. We want farms that produce actual food, not sugar, corn syrup, ethanol, unneeded cattle feed, and indigestible wheat for export. This model is broken on purpose, and billions of tax dollars are spent to keep it that way. We need a change in American agriculture, and we could have it if people voted for it. And I think I read that comment. I just sat there saying, all right, this guy probably has surplus in his budget for extra food every month. If you guys haven't spent time driving around the country or traveling in the US, like you might want to take some of your blinders off. Like there are still a lot of poor people in the US. Like we are not a country that is just like everyone is making 50 plus thousand a year and can buy a house and pay their rent every month and can't afford the luxuries that is nice food. Like I think people don't understand that like
good high quality produce and good high quality food is a luxury in the US, but to blame industrial agriculture would be the wrong place to point fingers. Like, we have lots of food in the US to feed a lot of people. And the food that is actually able to be afforded by people who can't, afford the nice food is the large scale commodity crops. Wheat and corn and soy can go into a lot of things and can be processed to make a lot of other foods. Like, that is something that is, yeah, it's not always the greatest. And diet wise, you can't just live off those three crops. That's very clear. But to say, oh man, like, we have to get rid of this is, like, I'm all for smaller farms. I'm all for more locally sourced food, but to make something like that happen is almost logistically impossible based on the geography of our country, the world. Like, you can't grow certain crops in certain areas, so they have to be trucked in from certain places. It costs money. Like, we are a middle class economy. If you want that, then go weed by hand an acre of food. Ask Neil does it. It is not easy work. Neil will work a full day and you will go spend an hour every single evening in your week taking care of your garden
Sure.
just for your family.
Yeah.
Do you think that we could just scale all of that quickly without either tons of migrant labor, which, by the way, a lot of the U.S. produce is harvested by hand still by migrant labor? Okay, like, it doesn't just happen overnight. And I see all these comments all the time, and it just rubs me the wrong way, just because we want the same thing. We're all on the same page here. It's just, I think, a miscommunication between what the industry actually is and what people think it is, and what the consumer wants, and the consumer saying, well, it's your fault this is happening. Like, it's a total, yeah, there's pointed fingers in the wrong places. And so, Neil, like, you being the industrial farmer who sells commodity crops that do feed a lot of people, but also producing your own garden, like, how do you feel? Like, how would you respond to a comment like that?
I mean, I think people have to realize that at the end of the day, like you said, it's very labor intensive. And when labor is involved, capital is involved. Because at the end of the day, one uh, fresh vegetable or fruit producer can't produce food to scale. It takes multiple people working in that labor to be able to produce copious amounts of product. So if you want to produce copious amounts of tomatoes or peppers or whatever the garden crop you choose that you want to scale, as you add acres to that crop, it creates a lot of labor need. And I think one of the problems here in the United States is people don't want to get their hands dirty. They have decided that they do not want to go out and be hot each and every day. They want to stay in a climate controlled environment, and to the detriment of the labor market here. So not only do we have, it is hard work to produce a fresh product, and you have to have a ready labor supply willing to do that work. And one of our problems here in the U.S. is we don't have a ready labor market that wants to be able to go out there and work in the fields each and every day. Is it an honorable job? Yes, very honorable. Is it a job that a lot of people want to do here in the U.S.? No. Why is that? Well, probably because we've been taught that it's better to sit behind a desk or to get a college degree. But but to me, like somebody that produces industrial grains but also produces fresh produce, it's a very enjoyable job. It's a hot job and a difficult job. And it is the same thing on the industrial grain side. Do we have big machinery to aid in the production of those crops? Yes. But is it still a very labor intensive job? Yes. You're still, still a lot of that production is there's a mechanical side to it, and there's also you have to move those products, and in moving those products, you're gonna get dirty, and so with both sides of the coin, a lot of labor is required, less for the industrial grain, and that's why those can be produced at scale so much more cheaply.
Mhm.
Because as a farmer, would I have the capabilities to go out and farm in 500 acres by myself without additional labor? Yes. Um, but could I grow 500 acres of vegetable crops by myself? There's not a chance. You'd probably need just to farm an acre of vegetable crops. You'd need a couple of men. So or men or one man that just worked full time in that acre. So you can see the problem with producing copious amounts of vegetable crops is, at the end of the day, labor is very expensive, and why does that those dozen sweet corn ears cost $1 a piece? Because at the end of the day, somebody had to weed and then pick those ears, by hand. Or even if they had a machine, that machine was expensive. So we have is our system perfect? No. There can always be room to improve any system, but we do have a very effective system to feed the masses. And for where we're at as a society currently, where we do have a lot of people below the threshold of surplus, you have a lot of people with the ability to get by, but not a lot of ability to expand their budgets. It's very efficient to be able to have a supply of grain available to be processed into foods that are they highly nutritious? No, but will they get you by without hunger in your belly? Yes, they will, and so it's good to have both. You know, Probably do we need to teach more, like in schools? Should we be teaching kids how to grow gardens and how to be effective in tilling of the land? Yes, because I think at the end of the day, everybody should know how to produce that food. Because if society breaks down to the point where you know the industrial farms aren't able to produce a supply, then you need to be able to produce enough to feed your family. So I just think we need to be very cognizant of calling the industrialized ag people such as me bad people just because we're producing a supply of a commodity that's demanded on the world market.
Yeah, absolutely. It's demand on the world market, and it is an effective way to feed people. It's not the best. I'm not going to say it's the healthiest way, but it is currently the best form we have to feed that many people. I think I would love to be able to get my hands on high quality fruits and veggies and more types of food at a lower cost. Absolutely,
Sure.
but that's a luxury that not everyone has. There are places that don't even I think of rural America. You drive through every single small town these days, and there's a Dollar General in there. Dollar General is great because it's cheap. Dollar General is not great because it's everywhere. Dollar General is really great because it's cheap. Dollar General doesn't have the ability to charge what fruits and veggies actually cost to produce for the people who need that food. And so when they come into town, it's like, all right, they have cheap food that I can eat. I think a lot of us really underestimate what hunger can do to us. Food is a very emotional thing. That's why people are so passionate about agriculture, and people are so passionate about gardening. And if you're completely removed from the industry, you probably have opinions about farming and industrial agriculture just because you do eat every day. And whether you like it or not, you have to depend on this every single day. And so there's a huge emotional aspect to that. And I think we in the U.S. often forget, hey, we as a country really haven't had to experience hunger pretty much ever. There are places around the world that experience hunger every day, and we look at them and say, oh, well, they're just less civilized, they're less far along. And you think about it, it's like, well, man, there's people starving there. There are people in the streets who are suffering. We don't really see a lot of suffering in the U.S. You see an occasional homeless guy out on the streets every once in a while, but you're not every single day witnessing people suffer. I think it's really easy for us to take for granted this system that we have and point out all of its flaws and not understand, okay, we are in a much better place than the rest of the world because we aren't waking up every day wondering where our food's going to come from. Every single day you wake up and
even if it's not the best for you, you can drive to a Walmart, you can drive to your local grocery store, and you can buy something off the shelf that is frozen, and it's not going to kill you. When was the last time you had to think about going to the store and having something kill you because you ate it, or being worried? Like COVID was the first time I think ever in our generation that anyone's ever thought about, like, oh, there might not be food in the stores. The whole toilet paper scare thing that happened. Like that's like the first time anyone's ever been like, oh, this might not be around forever. And so everyone just went and bought all of it. Food's the same way. Like, if we don't have the mindset of this is, you know, we should be thankful for what we already have. We should be appreciative of the people who have put in the work. Be willing to acknowledge the flaws. Any good farmer will acknowledge that everything
Sure.
is not perfect. We have messed up. We have done things wrong. Like, no farm operation is perfect. Not all our practices are perfect, but we grow and we learn and we try to do better. The same should go with our idea of, the industry itself. Is like, we need to be approaching this saying, like, let me learn more about this. Like, okay, why is it the way it is? Is it just because of subsidies? Is it just because people want money? Is there a part of that? Yes. But are there a lot of people who are working hard every day to feed people? Yes. Is it perfect? No. Should we always be trying to find better solutions to problems? Absolutely. Is it going to change overnight? Never. This is not something, the way we think about our food, the way we grow our food, this is not something that changes every day for the better or for the worse. It's little steps in different directions that move us here and there. Every once in a while, there's a big policy change that really starts to, shake things up a little, but more or less, it's a slow churning of all these things. And so you're a person who's like, yeah, I want more locally produced foods. Like, all right, challenge you, go start a garden.
Yeah.
Don't say, farmers, get on top of it, I would like food, please. Don't just ring the bell and expect it to show up on your plate. Like, that's just not gonna, you got to take ownership over these things. And there's 100 excuses for why you couldn't do it and why you can't do it. The only excuse is just not trying. That's the only, you can just say, hey, I just don't have time to try. You live in an apartment, I'm sure there's a local community garden somewhere. Every place I've ever lived has always had some sort of community garden that people partake in. In a town of 1,000 people, there was a community garden. In a city of millions, there is somewhere where you can get involved and learn how to garden. It's not something that's just so foreign. Oh, I don't have a place to plant anything. It's like, you can do it. Yeah, I'm getting on a soapbox again. Every time I do a podcast, I just always get on soapboxes.
That's a
Like,
good thing. You got to talk.
we gotta have some form of ownership over this sort of stuff, or nothing's ever gonna change. If you're gonna point, that's the issue. That's my biggest frustration with the internet. It's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of blaming, but so much of it is just noise that just ends up in the echo chamber and just frustrates more people. Like, you're not contributing anything to society other than continuing to tear other people down. Like, nothing's ever gonna happen if we're just constantly criticizing everything. You can criticize something and still do something about it. You can criticize something and still support it. Like, you don't have to. We're so polarized in everything that we do. Our food system is the one place where you don't want everyone fighting each other, because when people are too busy fighting each other, you're gonna, like, people will starve, people will die. Like, we have to be coming at for this all from the same, at least trying to come at this on the same team, maybe not the same perspective, agreeing on everything, but saying, all right, we have people we've got to feed. People are never going to stop needing to be fed, and we have a ton of land that we need to figure out how to use well. Everyone, I think most farmers can agree on that. It's like, we got a job to do. I keep saying we. I'm not a farmer, but, like, there are things that need to be done. Let's figure out how to do it. But across the board, there's never been just people saying, like, we need to get on this page or this page. It's always a bunch of different voices saying a bunch of different things all the time. And so there's my 2 cents. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, guys, start your own garden.
What I would have to say is, like, if you are, you're like, I want to see more fresh food available. I want that you're excited about. I would say go out and support that local guy that is supplying that product financially. So if you have the ability to go out and provide your family with, fresh produce or grass-fed beef or whatever niche market that, that you're excited about, I would say, if you have that financial ability, to go out and do that, because in turn what happens is the people that are producing those products, as they receive more capital, they can acquire more land and more fertilizer, and the next year they can produce more food, and that food becomes more available to maybe the person in lower socioeconomic status that can't afford that super expensive thing of organic grapes or
Yeah.
whatever it is. So put your money where your mouth is and go out there and spend it
Amen.
instead of just running your mouth about who you think is the demon in the market or whatever.
Yeah, and that's such a big thing, and I'm a huge advocate for voting with your dollars. It's really easy to complain. We were talking about Amazon yesterday, Neil and I. We were talking about how people will complain about land use and farming and saying farmers are killing the planet and all these things. But at the same time, Amazon is leveling 1,000 acres to put up a new warehouse so that you can get your product a couple minutes earlier because they have a warehouse now a little close to you. And so you think about that, it's like everyone, if I said that to you, you'd probably be like, oh yeah, like I'm not a fan of leveling 1,000 acres and just taking it out of either forest or grassland or cropland just so I can get my package there. But you look at the way people vote and the way people spend their dollars. It's like, okay, you say you really want that, but when it comes to like your convenience level, you're still spending that money. And it's the same thing with food. Like
Sure.
we talk a big game about wanting all these different changes in our food system, but you look at the end of the day, you look at who's spending their money on these things. It's still at the end of the day, the consumer is the one saying we want more of this by the way we're spending money. And so what you're saying is like, yeah, go find that local producer and spend money with them. I am a huge advocate for that. And you also don't have to like change it overnight. You don't have to be like, all right, I'm never buying from a grocery store again. I'm only going to buy local, all these things. Like it can be as simple as, hey, I almost guarantee you can find a farmer's market within 45 minutes of your house, either on Thursdays or Saturdays. They're usually Thursdays or Saturdays. I don't know why. You can probably go find a farmer's market and you can go spend $15 on fruits and veggies for the next week. That's it. That's all you have to do. And right there, you have now taken that step of saying, all right, this is something that I want to do. So your brain has said, I want to do this. So you're probably, first of all, going to notice it tastes a little better because it probably will.
It will.
And second of all, that producer now got a new customer who it may have only been $15, but if you ever run your own business, $15 in the green is a good $15.
That's
right. So if you can just do like little steps like that, like it can go a long way. And like the industry is never going to change overnight. And if you want more local farms, you want more locally sourced stuff. It's like Neil said, like the more they have to fight to find customers, like the harder their life is. The more they can focus on producing, the more they're going to be able to produce. And so your part in doing that is being willing to spend that extra few dollars now, knowing that, hey, their cost of production could come down one day and they can charge less. We've got, I live in a weird place where we have a lot of industrial farming, but we also have this place called The Farm. It's like right down the road from me. They've got, I think, about 30, 40 acres in production, and you can do your little box pickups. You can order online, and you can just do that. And it's still more expensive than what you buy at Walmart. You're not going to be getting bottom line prices, but you're not, it's when you average it out, you're not spending significantly more than you would be. And it's one of those things that's also been really cool for the community to come in and say, hey, like, look, we can see how they're growing all this food. They still use tractors. They're not massive tractors, but they still got tractors around. They're moving stuff around. They're doing small levels of tillage here and there. Like, it's still something that you can be a part of. And they've only gotten there because they figured out how to reach customers. And those customers have said, we want to be a part of this. And so the fact that enough people have caught on to that shows me, hey, people do want this. But to say everyone wants that, I think we're still a little ways off from that. So what can you do? You can be the one to set. If you have that extra margin in your budget, be willing to say I want to spend more on my food, because that's going to go a lot better for all the people who have to buy cheap food because they have no other choice but to survive. You either have a roof over your head or you have good food. You're always going to choose the roof over your head and go with the cheap food, And so the best way you can play your part is to spend your money a little better, Say, I don't need to buy that thing on Amazon, or I don't need a new sweatshirt, or, I don't need that. If you buy an iced coffee once a week, you could spend that at a farmer's market. Or what you could do even better is you could not buy something from the grocery store and then average out whatever that iced coffee would be over the rest of it, and you'd be able to just buy that higher quality product. It's just about your spending habits. If you can change that, I mean, the world could literally change if people were willing to do more stuff like that. The issue is that comfortability. So this is my encouragement to anyone who's listening to this. Like, take that step. If you have a problem with the way our food is grown and you really want to eat healthier, don't complain about it online. Go buy that food like tomorrow.
I
or
would totally
cider.
agree. Support that local market, and in turn, that that helps that local producer be able to produce more the next season.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like we said, it requires capital to be able to produce these. These what I would consider fresh food a luxury item. It is a luxury item. It's very pricey
Hmm.
when you compare it to when you compare it to just processed foods. Um, and I think I think that as people get into that mindset and they go out and they seek out these local producers, it is good overall for the community.
Hmm.
They can see how their food is produced. They can see that it's produced in a safe and healthy way, and then it's more healthy for their family. So
Hmm.
I agree that we definitely need uh, to look at how we're budgeting our um, you know our money, and if we're passionate about fresh quality food, go out and look for those guys that are producing it and support them, and
Hmm.
in turn, um, your community will be better in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think everyone's actually on the same page. You, Neil, a lot of the farmers I meet with, most of the people I know who have big gardens aren't actually people who are against the food system. It's usually farmers. It's usually the people who are growing these crops every day, who are the ones who know the system inside out. And like, yeah, I want to have my own garden. And they're the ones who also understand the principles of it all. It makes it easier for them to be like, yeah, well, it's easy for me to grow a quarter acre of my own garden because I farm 1,000 acres.
Yeah,
It makes a lot of sense when you already have all that knowledge. And so I think we're all on the same team here. Like, hey, we want better food for
sure.
everyone. We want cheaper food for everyone. And we want more local producers to be able to make a profit at the end of the day. I think there's just this huge disconnect that large scale farmer, small family farm, I produce vegetables over here, I produce grains over here, are opposed to each other and that they're on different teams. It's like that's just not the case. I think a lot, yeah, people, we're all on the same page
Sure.
here. We all want the same thing. I think just kind of trying to break down these walls that people have in their heads that you, Mr. Grain Farmer, are against you, Mr. Small producer over here who's just a hobby farmer or might only sell at farmers markets. Like, hey, we're on the same team here. We
Oh, for
want you to,
sure.
we want everyone to succeed here. In an ideal utopian society, everyone would have local farms just all around them and
Right.
everyone's just sharing foods and they're all happy and they're all singing songs together. But unfortunately, the real world is people are hungry, people are suffering, there are greedy people out there. Like nothing's going to be perfect, and so you have the opportunity to complain about it, or you have the opportunity to change something about it and do something about it.
Sure. I think back to when we were talking about, how blessed we are in America to be able to, even if it isn't the most nutritious food every day, we have the ability to eat. At the end of the day, society is built upon the ability to feed the people, or a civilized society is, how civilized it is based on the ability to feed the people. So, like when you look at a place like North Korea, where they literally starve to death in the winter because of the way their food system is set up, we're so blessed not to be in that situation where they do have the ability to produce food, but they're not allowed to produce it, or it's taken from them once it's produced. Versus here in America, where we're in a semi-free market society, and the government isn't going to swoop in and take the food that is produced, and it's distributed by the market versus distributed by the government. And
Hmm.
then what happens if the government distributes it? Well, the government makes sure that whoever's running the government is fed, and the people, the common person, isn't looked after.
Yeah, quick side note. Anytime the government has ever tried to control food in pretty much all of history, I'm yet to see an account where it works out. I think there's one Joseph in the Bible is the one account I've ever seen in all of history where the government controlling the food has worked out for the end consumer.
Yeah,
So just
that's never a good thing, is it?
yeah, like we laugh about it now, but it's like it's we're laughing because it's true.
Yeah, for sure. Like if they, if to be able to control the food is to be able to control the people.
Yeah.
So,
So you knowing where your food comes from and just having even basic principle, like even if you're not doing it every day, even try the gardening thing. If it's not for you, you're like, I don't like this, at least figure out how to do it and say, you know what, I'll save, I'd rather save myself some time and give a few dollars to this person. Like we want that for everyone. Just knowing where your food comes from, knowing people like Neil, knowing people that you see on the internet is like, hey, regardless of what you think of them, is like, hey, these are the people growing your food. Like this is important to you because at the end of the day, we really do care about people knowing where their food comes from, not only for your knowledge sake, but just for your safety sake. Like we want people to know where their food comes from because we have seen times in history where people haven't had food, where we have seen governments come in and take control, or we have seen droughts, we have seen famines. Like at the end of the day, like we know if you just think historically, those things feel like they could never happen, but history will constantly prove itself that those things can happen. And so a part of Neil and I wanting to do stuff like this is not just like we do want more people to get involved, we want more people to hear about this, but there's also like a sense of like responsibility that we have to want to share this stuff because we don't want to live in a world where people don't know about that sort of stuff because it's scary. Like people have and can and will die if like we don't talk about these things and we let our conscious, if we subconsciously let our knowledge of food just slowly disappear and we let people start telling us this is what your food system actually is or saying here's your government ration of food. We just have to do our part in saying, hey, like let's talk about these things at least. We don't have to be doomsday about it, but like let's just do our part and talk about this.
Sure, I think it's important that just everybody in society realizes that at the end of the day, a good, cheap, reliable food supply is the best to have a sustainable society. We want to have a very sustainable civilization that doesn't have to be like North Korea, where in the wintertime they end up dying because there's no food available. Society, especially urban society, cannot survive like that. Like there would be mass chaos the week after the food runs out. If I mean, this is the sad thing about it. If food was taken away, people resort to stealing and killing to be able to feed their family because nobody wants to see their kids starve. Or if they're starving themselves, they're going to act more rash versus if they're well fed and their kids are well fed. Even if they don't have everything that they want, at least their belly's full and they're content to just be another day and without running a ruckus.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think this is probably the most important episode we've had so far of, hey, like this is something that's important for everyone to know about. And so, yeah, if you guys enjoyed this, we're going to wrap this up about now because I think we could go on another rant for another 45
I could
minutes.
talk about this for
we
hours.
we do have some corn that needs to go get harvested. Please like and share this. That last little part there, if you've made it this far, like guys, like that's what really matters to us. Like we really want this to be something much bigger than ourselves. Like we really want you to benefit from this. We want people who listen to this to come out away from this at least just thinking about their food in the system a little more. We don't have to, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like that's my big thing is like we don't have to be like the system doesn't have to be perfect. We don't need to sit here and defend every little I and T that we're gonna cross, but we do want to start just shedding more light and more information on, hey, like this is our perspective, people have this perspective, let's all just be a little nicer to each other. So yeah, there's a ton of potential for this. So please like and share, guys. Like we really, we cannot ask you enough. Like that, like hey, like we aren't just doing this for ourselves. Like we are doing this because we do really care about this industry and we care a lot about where our food comes from, not just for our sake, but for the world's sake. And so,
no, I echo Clayton's sentiment. I mean, I want to see I told him I love to produce garden vegetables more than I like to produce corn and soybeans. But, I mean, I'm I'm at the mercy of what can make my family money. And
Mhm.
so, do I think that we don't need to produce good quality food? No, I think we do. I think there needs to be a good balance. And
Yeah.
I do appreciate having the conversation, and I appreciate everybody's support, just supporting what we're trying to do, and
Yeah.
giving it a listen. And if you like what you hear, share it with your buddy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah.